I'm Steven. Let's talk Venom. Let There Be Carnage, the sequel to Tom Hardy's Venom outing from a couple of years back, and essentially Sony's attempt to start a Spider-Verse without Spider-Man. How can that be done? Very carefully. Let's get to the basics of the character and start with the fact that Venom is heavily based in Spider-Man. In fact, you can't have one without the other if you go by the comic book origin. Way back in the 80s, a bunch of superheroes were brought to this giant planet where they faced off against their counterpart villains in an epic battle to save the known universe. It was called Secret Wars. Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man, was one of them. His costume had gotten torn up from the fighting. He had no web shooters left, so he found a machine that he thought was supposed to fix his costume. Instead, it released a symbiote, which was something that bonded with Peter, and then got to know who he was and mimicked his spider powers, giving him permanent web shooters and letting him change costume at will. Plus, it also started making him get a little violent, get a little crazy. So Peter did everything he could with the help of the Fantastic Four, figuring out that the symbiote didn't like sound. He went to a church bell, separated himself from Venom, leading the Venom symbiote to not only hate Peter Parker and Spider-Man, but it searched out someone who equally hated Peter Parker and Spider-Man, which would be Eddie Brock. They eventually became Venom, which is one of Spider-Man's most deadly enemies back in the day. That has nothing to do with either of these movies. If you saw the first one, you know there was no Spider-Man references whatsoever to how Tom Hardy got his powers. He does make a great Eddie Brock, though. And let me start by saying I was someone who did not like the first Venom movie, but I did have a lot of fun with this one, and I liked it instead. This go around, they bring Venom back into the picture fresh off of what happened in the last movie. You don't need to necessarily see the last movie to understand what's going on here, but Eddie's career gets a boost when Cletus Cassidy, the serial killer on death row, says he'll grant Eddie a interview, and during the interview the police are hoping that maybe Cassidy will literally tell Eddie where the bodies are buried. That doesn't happen. He gets poetry instead, and on the second time they see each other, Cassidy bites Eddie, which now leads the symbiote in Eddie's bloodstream to be in Cletus Cassidy as well, leading to the birth of Carnage. You get a bunch of symbiote fighting, and you realize that Cletus Cassidy is very crazy. When he breaks out of prison, he doesn't mind killing people, and the word Carnage is a fitting name for the character because that's what he brings. Eddie has to deal with his personal relationships with Venom, his ex-girlfriend slash fiance, and everyone else in the world to try to stop the chaos that is Carnage. And I won't go into too many spoilers there. The things that worked for this: Tom Hardy's inner conflict with Venom is a lot of fun to watch. That was probably the highlight of the first movie. This go around, Woody Harrelson is phenomenal as Cletus Cassidy. You can tell he was having fun with this, and he really is, he loves playing those crazy type characters. And the overall story, it was fast-paced. It's only 90 minutes long, and a lot of people have been complaining about the length of it, but the length of it works. It moves pretty quickly. Andy Serkis is the guy who directed it. It has its fair share of CGI, but it does rely on the love and conflict. The conflict between Eddie and his ex-fiancée, the conflict between Eddie and Venom, and of course the father-son relationship between Venom and Carnage. It's good stuff. It's enjoyable. Don't know where they're going to go with it from here, but it is definitely entertaining, and that's, I guess, the most we can ask for these days. My problem with it is it references the comic, but it doesn't stay truthful to the comic. One of the biggest things is, without Spider-Man, Venom looks like Venom, but not really, because the coolest part about Venom, and everybody knows it, is the white spider symbol that Venom has emblazoned on his chest. That doesn't show up yet. They do kind of tease the Lethal Protector storyline, which is fun, and Carnage gets a little bit of a raw deal at the end. The character is brought to life pretty well, but I think they could have done even more with it with what they do in the future. We'll see. The rumor has it is eventually Spider-Man will come away from Marvel and be the star of the Sony Spider-Verse. Sooner or later, you figure those characters have to meet at some point in time. Again, for me, it's just hard to have a character that's based really heavily on Spider-Man without Spider-Man. Stick around for the post-credit scene because there is some good stuff in there. And again, if you are going to the movies this weekend to see it because you cannot stream it, it's worth the watch. It's 90 minutes of your time. It's fun. I give it, let's say, 3 out of 5 thumbs up, maybe. I don't know. Venom, Let There Be Carnage, in theaters now. If you are a comic book purist, you might not like it, but for the rest of us, it's not bad. Thanks for watching. Remember, down in front.